I'd like to introduce Sai Swarupa ji over here to all of you. Sai Swarupa ji is a very prominent Indic author. She has told in Avishi and Mori. I think Avishi is her latest book, and she has been doing Draupadi is the fourth book that has come out now. So we are having her with us. She's going to present a very interesting insight into her understanding and her lessons from Mahabharata, and she has explored an studied aspect of Mahabharata. Ma'am, I would like to reveal a little about it. She has explored one-on-one battles between the different warriors and has come up with an observation of who can be termed as the greatest warriors of Mahabharata. So today we are actually having her to share her thoughts and ideas about her entire studies and lessons from Mahabharata, and then how did she actually come up on the idea of analyzing one-on-one battles, and then giving us her take on who she thinks is the greatest warrior. Ma'am, I would now like you to start this and enlighten us on your entire journey.
Namaste, Harshji. Thanks a lot for the very kind introduction. Namaste, everyone. Thank you for coming, right after the lunch time. Hope I'll be able to keep you awake through the presentation. Let me start with just share the screen. You could probably tell me if, yeah. The presentation is visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So, before we start, guys, so I just want a quick feedback from you all on who all are pretty much aware of the dynamics of Mahabharata and how it came to this epic battle of 18 days. So everyone is aware, or shall I just do a quick recap of the story? So here I'm looking for a chat so that I can aware. Okay, sure. Yes, just a 2-minute recap. Mahabharata mostly deals with this few cousins in the Kuru family, right? From the story of that, the battle between, or the rivalry between cousins in the Kuru family of Hastinapura, we are given an unforgettable lesson on dharma in various forms. So if we want to see our historical Vedic culture, the whole of Vedas in practice, it has to be from Mahabharata. The epic is known as Panchama Veda, or the fifth Veda. Basically, it is all the 4 Vedas in action. That's how I understand it. So in this, because rivalry between cousins in a family over property is a story we hear from almost every other family. I don't think it's just India. It's it's a global this one. Some feud over property, but such a common story. But how it has been explored from the eyes of each of these characters, I don't like to call them characters because Mahabharata is very much our history. It's not just history, but it's a present and future at some level. So Mahabharata is like our consciousness. It's our civilizational consciousness. So in for people who don't know the details, there is a Kuru dynasty ruling over Hastinapura, which which is practically the Delhi and some parts of UP, the Kuru family. There are two brothers, Dhritarashtra, the three brothers in fact, Dhritarashtra, Pandu and Vidura. Right, all three are the biological sons of Vedavyasa, who happens to be the author of Mahabharata. So these are amongst these, Dhritarashtra is when he's born blind, right? So he was not considered eligible to rule from the throne. So Pandu was made the king and he expanded the kingdom, but because of an unfortunate incident, he had to take retirement along with his two queens, Kunti and Madri, and Dhritarashtra was made the king in Pandu's place. But while Pandu was in his retirement phase, he wanted children, but he could not have children. But his queen Kunti had a boon to, she had a boon from sage Durvasa, Rishi Durvasi, she had a mantra that can invoke any god of her choice to give her a son. So she tells Pandu about this, and Pandu wants a son who can rule over the whole of the kingdom, who can make a worthy king. So according to Pandu's wishes, Kunti invokes Yamadharmaraja, Lord of Dharma, Dharmaraja, Vayu and Indra. So from them, they are Yudhishthira, Bhima and Arjuna are born, and her co-wife Madri, she propitiates Ashwini Kumaras, from whom Nakula and Sahadeva, twins, are born. So Pandu has now 5 sons who are actually the sons of gods themselves. So with her ability, Kunti has a past. She would have invoked Surya Dev when she was not very sure about how this mantra works. She just wanted to try it out, and she invoked Surya Dev, and Surya gave her a son, Karna. And because as an unmarried girl, she was very unsure about mothering an infant and whatever would follow in the society as well as her own life, which is why she let him flow in the Ganga river, where he was found by Atiratha, who was one of the charioteers, or actually he was one of the nobility in Hastinapura royal family. And as luck would have it, Kunti was also married to the royal family of Hastinapura, to Pandu. So yes, Pandu was in his retirement phase. Now they have 5 sons, but due to another unfortunate incident, he dies. And Madri joins him on the pyre. She commits Sati Sahagamana. And Kunti, along with her 5 sons, she comes back to Hastinapura to claim the right to the throne for Yudhishthira, because he happens to be the eldest of this generation. Here, Dhritarashtra would have given birth to 100 sons headed by Duryodhana. So Duryodhana happens to be younger to Yudhishthira, which is why, that is not the only reason, but that's one of the reasons, key reasons why Yudhishthira was made the king, and that made the Yuvaraja, the prince, the heir prince. So that causes a lot of, it starts as jealousy, but it, assumes a monstrous form in the heart of Duryodhana, and from there the rivalry just worsens and worsens and worsens. He starts attempting on the lives of Pandavas. He tries to poison Bhima, then he tries to burn them all in a lakh house, in a Lakshagraha. After that, even they come back alive. They come back with a new queen. They marry the princess of Panchala, Draupadi, and they come back stronger. So they have to. So here Dhritarashtra, he realizes that he has to do something for peace. So he divides his kingdom into 2 and gives a portion called Khandava Prastha. That's basically modern Delhi. So that Khandava Prastha he gives to Yudhishthira and his brothers and their queen Draupadi. Now, Khandava Prastha is not a very flourishing land. It's, it has forests, it has uncultivable land, it's not developed. Maybe some Nagas and some rural tribes are living there, but but Pandavas transform it into a glorious city, wonderful city with a lot of opulence, and they call it Indraprasth. After that, Yudhishthira performs Rajasuya Yajna. That confers him. Performing Rajasuya Yajna basically requires you to conduct a Digvijaya. That is, you or your brothers or anybody who represents you have to. They have to launch a Digvijaya. That is, they have to conquer all the kingdoms, or either they would say either. What do you say? The other kings, they have to either stay as allies or they have to win over Yudhishthira to stay independent. But as the Pandavas, the four brothers of Yudhishthira are very violent, very valiant. So they managed to conquer almost all of ancient undivided India. That's right from Gandhara, that is Afghanistan and parts of Iran, to Kamboja Gandhara, that's parts of Iran, right to Sri Lanka. And in the east till Assam, and even parts of the Shonitpur should be mostly India, and parts of Nepal and China. So then that is the original Bharata, right? The original undivided India. But as soon as they perform the Rajasuya, and they become the lords of this land, they are invited for a game of dice by. By now he realized that he cannot win over them on the battlefield, so it has to be some some underhanded technique, some easier technique. So he invites the Pandava brothers for a game of dice, and in that that era, game of dice is equivalent to a war. So if if someone challenges a king to a game of dice, what is called as Dyuta, his rejecting it would either show that he's a coward or that he wants a war. That basically puts Yudhishthira in a very precarious position where he has to accept the challenge, and there, what this call, basically the story takes its worst turn in that game of dice, because Yudhishthira loses not just his riches, his treasury, his kingdom, their weapons, then one by one his brothers, and last himself, and lastly his queen Draupadi. And it's because things go spiral out of control very badly from then, and Draupadi is dragged into the sabha like a slave, called all names, and Dushasana tries to disrobe her, but she saves herself because of her tapasya and pativratya. She saves herself, and finally she also manages to save her husbands from being slaves of Kauravas, and then they decide to play a second game of dice. In that second game, the condition is that the loser would go on a vanavasa of 12 years, and another Ajñātavasa of 1 year. The 13th year has to be spent in Ajñātavasa. That is, you have to stay undetected. Once you are detected, then the whole vanavasa and Ajñātavasa repeats. So Pandavas, they successfully complete this 12 years of vanavasa and Ajñātavasa, and they come back to claim the kingdom. Krishna, there are 3 peace missions that happen from Pandavas to Kauravas, 3 attempts to secure the kingdom, but every request or every demand is turned down by Duryodhana. So finally, it boils down to this epic scale war between two branches of the same family. But let us see, who all participate in this war. So I hope I was clear about the story till here. Can someone type if there are any doubts? I'm afraid I'm not seeing any? Yes, clear. Thank you, Raghavan. So, coming back to today's presentation, I have already given you the introduction to how Kurukshetra came to be. And let us look at the armies that are participating in this Mahabharata war. Sorry, I guess this font is a little. Let me. Oh my. One second. I'm so sorry, guys. I paste this whole from a different presentation that I had given 2 weeks back to a group of management professionals. Changes. That's why I had pasted. So the Pandava camp has Akshauhinis. Akshauhini is basically, I'll the details. It's basically about a little more than 1,100,000 elephants, same number of chariots, thrice the number of horses, and 5 times the number of foot soldiers. Big unit of the army. So there are these subdivisions within an Akshauhini. Maybe I'll share the details with you later. So Panchalas, that is Draupadi's family, right? That is basically eastern UP, eastern and northern UP. That comes under King Drupada. They come with one Akshauhini. Then there is Matsya Rajya, that is three parts of a little bit of Punjab. So under King Virata, they are related to Pandavas because they give their daughter Uttara to Abhimanyu, who is the son of Arjuna. They come with one Akshauhini. Then there is Satvata household of Yadavas. It's a branch of Yadavas under Satyaki. Satyaki is a great warrior who is a disciple of Arjuna. So out of sheer gratitude, he participates on the side of Pandavas. Under Drishtaketu. I think all of us are aware of a person called Shishupala who insults Krishna during Rajasuya. He would have also thought of marrying Rukmini Devi, who's the wife of Krishna, without her consent. At the nick of the time, Rukmini elopes with Krishna, so he has a grudge. But once he's killed, Drishtaketu, his son, is made the king of Chedi, and he's grateful to Pandavas for keeping the kingdom within their family. So he participates. Magadha under this Sahadeva is different from the Pandava Sahadeva. He's the son of Jarasandha. They one Akshauhini. Kunti Bhoja is father of Kunti. That's basically maternal grandfather of Pandavas. He comes in with one Akshauhini. And there are other assorted forces from south, from northern Punjab, and the Kekayas and other allies, the smaller warlords. They together they constitute one Akshauhini. So apart from this, rest of undivided India is basically in Kaurava camp. Bhagadatta, that is Assam and northeast, comes to Duryodhana. Talya, that's Madra. Basically the northwest, right? What they used to call as Sindhu Sauvira civilization on the banks of Indus, the modern river Indus. We used to call it Sindhu. So the Sindhu Sauvira civilization has these Kekaya, our Gandhara, Madra, and Sindhu. Right, those 4 kingdoms, they are related to at least Sindhu, Gandhara, and who's the other? The Kambhoja also, I guess. Yes, so they are basically related to the Duryodhana by maritally. Like Shakuni of Gandhara is the uncle of Duryodhana. Sindhu king Jayadratha is the brother-in-law of Duryodhana, and Sudakshina is another brother-in-law of Duryodhana. Basically, Sudakshina's sister has to be, I think, married Duryodhana, one of the Kaurava brothers. Then you have MP Madhya Pradesh Avanti, where Vinda and Anuvinda they side with Duryodhana. Then you have Kalinga, you have Gandha. Trigarta basically joins Duryodhana because they are the enemies of Matsya Desh here. So enemies of friend. That's one sutra that they believed in. So Matsya is participating on camp, so let us join the Kaurava. So then there are their own army and other allies they constitute. So basically have 11 Akshauhinis and Pandavas Akshauhinis. So at the start itself, one side is has around 50% more than the other side. Now coming to how the battle itself progressed. So there is the Kauravas made their commander, the first commander-in-chief of the Kaurava army was Bhishma. He led war for 10 days. So that 10 days is called, in Mahabharata, the 10 days is called Bhishma Parva. Each chapter of Mahabharata, the bigger chapter is called Parva. So Bhishma Parva is the chapter where Bhishma leads the war on the side of Kauravas. And there are noted deaths on the Pandava side. Uttara, Shankha, they are princes of Matsya Desha. Then there are 10 sons of Satyaki. Airavan, who's son of Arjuna through his group. Then on the Kaurava side, around 21 brothers of Duryodhana out of the 121 brothers, as well as 5 princes of Kalinga are killed. Basically, I'll come to that later, but we see that under Bhishma, the violence in the war was a bit controlled. So basically, he had a limit to himself, saying that he would kill only 10,000 people. That's not only, but yeah, he would kill at least 10,000 people, 10,000 soldiers or enemy soldiers in the war. After that, he basically he retires for the day. And at sunset, right at sunset, he used to withdraw. So nobody used to fight in the once there is nightfall. So he followed Bhishma followed a lot of code with respect to the battle. He's the one who set the code and stood by it. He stood by it. So after Bhishma comes Drona, who is the guru, the military of a lot of Divyastra, and he's a excellent strategician. So though he committed a couple of mistakes which costed Kaurava camp dearly, but he's someone who a lot of allies of Pandavas fear. He's that kind of a ruthless warrior. So he, under his commandeering, there was a total carnage. The war basically went to a different level. So there is death of Abhimanyu, Ghatotkacha, then Satyajit. Satyajit is another brother of Draupadi, and the whole host of Panchala princes, Drishtaketu, Sahadeva, all the ally kings that we discussed in the last slide. All of them die in the hands of, most of them die in the hands of Drona, some in the hands of Karna, one in the Ghatotkacha in the hands of Karna. Then there is the Kauravas, they also suffer a lot of damage while Drona is commandeering. So around 48 brothers of Duryodhana. Then there is Bhagadatta, who is from Assam and northeast. Then Lakshmana, Duryodhana's own son, Jayadratha, Purishrava, Somadatta. These are the Balika kingdom's royal family, and much more. There are names which we may not be able to recount. So then there is Karna Parva. So the Drona dies on the 5th day of his commandeering. So we finished 15 days. Then there is Karna Parva. Karna leads the army for 2 days. So there are the Pandavas have a minor setback during the Karna Parva. Basically, they have lost almost everybody during Drona's leadership. So they have some minor setbacks, but they happen to damage the Kaurava side a lot, because Bhima kills Dushasana and 7 more of Duryodhana's brothers, Karna's sons, and lastly Karna himself. Then the last day is under the commandership of Shalya, who is the king of Madra. After which Duryodhana is finally killed by Bhima, and then there is a midnight massacre of the remaining Panchalas and Upapandavas, that is sons of Draupadi and Pandavas, in the hands of Ashwathama. That's about the story of Kurukshetra. Now coming to the database of confrontations and what led me to document each of these battles. So Kurukshetra, the significance of Kurukshetra is so much that every person keeps comparing his life to Kurukshetra, right? We need not be killing people, but every obstacle in the way of our, we have certain aspirations. They can be materialistic, they can be spiritual, they can be religious, they can be social. But in our pursuit of each aspiration, right, we come across a lot of obstacles, and each of those obstacles has a lesson for us. We either overcome and go to the next stage, or we give in and we pursue another route, probably another aspiration. So in each of these confrontations, the story of Kurukshetra keeps inspiring us. There are a lot of lessons that we can learn from the way this war happened and the compromises each warrior had to make, and the resilience each warrior had to show. Right, as we read the story in detail, unabridged, for this particular exercise, my source was Critical Edition of Mahabharata by Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute, which was put together by a Pandit, Sanskrit Pandit called V.S. Subthankar and his team of Sanskrit Pandits. They put together this critical edition of Mahabharata, which is translated into English by Dr. Vivek Devroy. I would strongly encourage everyone of you to start reading the critical edition of Mahabharata. Just now that you are aware of the rough story, right? You can just start with any book, any chapter, and it will have a lot of lessons that would be useful for each of our, to each of us in different turns and twists of our lives. So that's a strong recommendation from my side to read unabridged critical edition of Mahabharata, and it takes, because it's a 10-volume book which can occupy one whole shelf of your cupboard. But I would say just start anywhere and trust the magic of Vedavyasa. You will just find yourself reading the whole of it, and that won't go waste. It's like your friend for life, if I may say. So coming to my exercise of this documentation of these battles, one, I am very passionate about data visualization, because I had before becoming an author, I worked with the IT industry. I worked with startups. I worked with as an investment analyst with a venture capital firm. So there is always this data and visualization thing, which is a part of me that hasn't, the analyst hasn't got away from me. I got away from the job of analyst. So this is something which I always wanted to visualize as to how many confrontations would have happened, and what could have tested each warrior to his limits. And I'll come to that later. And then there are a lot of myths in popular adaptations, right? Because once a story or any historical character or a story becomes very popular, automatically legends form around the real part of the story, right? I would not want to call them unreal, but they are poetical renditions of history which would have a lot of exaggerations. So from those exaggerations, there are again, local folklores, regional folklores, and local poets and storytellers adding their own creativity. And as time passes, right, we form this tapestry of folklores and legends, which would be, I won't want to say it, I don't want to say it as wrong, but we would be really, really far away from the core of the story. Because with each passing generation, we build a different set of stories around the core story. So there is always a need to go to the original and review what it has for us. When I support the storytelling, I support creative liberty. I'm an author myself, and I've taken creative liberties with the stories that I have written. So that's an expression of a poet. But as a civilization, we have this duty to keep going back to the original, keep going back to what they call as the moola, the base, the foundation of whatever we have inherited, and review that, strengthen the knowledge of that foundation. And as I said, it has a lot of inspirational tales for us. Then there are unsung and underrated warriors whose stories, they are also worthy retelling. Like example of Satyaki I had given. We'll see his, the importance of Satyaki. Otherwise, I guess none of the popular renditions of Mahabharata have even taken his name. I don't know why. But, there are these... there are stories around the Kurukshetra, the original. It explores Satyaki valor in a great detail. Then there is underlying philosophy as well as strategic lessons that may be of use to us. We don't know what would be useful at what stage, but we can, knowing it is always a good thing, right? And then there is a good database of such battles. It will always help us to understand. That's a quantitative analysis. That will always add as a very good tool to qualitative analysis. Sorry, somebody had something to say? Okay. I'll continue. Hello? Yes?
Hello. Ma'am, you can continue.
Yeah, sure.
Hello.
Okay. Yeah, I'm continuing. Then there are limitations of this whole exercise. That is definitely the quantitative cannot override qualitative study of the epic. So it can be used only as a assisting tool. And in this particular draft of my database, all victories are treated equally, which I'd probably improve in my second draft. But coming to the data. In 18 days of war, there are 463 confrontations that have happened between both sides. Now that's a number, right? Out of 463 battles, there are decisive battles where it could be decisively said that this person won against that person, or this group won against that group. So there are around 307 decisive battles, in which 216 went in the favor of Pandavas and 91 went in the favor of Kauravas. This came as a shock to me, because I was expecting, a 50-50 kind of a distribution, or maybe 60-40, because Bhima and Arjuna are great warriors and in their prime. But this is something which came as a shock to me. Then there is no recorded result for 156 matches, because real war, right? I don't think any recorded war could get as real as Mahabharata war, because there would be, like, say, a warrior A and warrior B fighting each other. The warrior A will begin to dominate, then suddenly warrior B's brother or friend or son or father would come to protect him. Then from there, all of them would start attacking warrior A. Then warrior A's relatives or friends would come to support him. Then there is a one whole group fighting the other group. Where anybody is attacking anybody. Then again they spawn off into group duels. Maybe warrior A is fighting with warrior B's elder brother. Warrior B is fighting with warrior A's son. So that kind of a melee that can happen only in a real battle, right? The original Mahabharata has gone into that detail of each confrontation, and it has recorded basically to the level of how many arrows were exchanged in each confrontation, and how many javelins were thrown, how many gadas were thrown, how many swords got broken, and the detail is just mind-boggling. So in this, we have cumulative duels where multiple warriors attacking one warrior. Right? Abhimanyu is one not of such cumulative battles happen. Then there are duels where the confrontation is strictly 1-to-1, like say Arjuna Karna, Bhima Duryodhana, or and many such battles. And there are a lot of battles between Drona and Drupada, Drona and Drishtadyumna. So where there are Kaurava victories for 73 and Pandava victories for 165. Then there are general battles. That is where 3-4 groups, 3-4 people on one side attack 3-4 people on the other side, multiple people. Then there is a special battle between two elephants. Vyasa has not let even that detail go out of for the readers. Then there is one elephant battle where that group of Kauravas coming to victories by Parva. There is Bhishma Parva, where 26 battles went in favor of Kauravas and 55 went in favor of Pandavas. Drona, especially, you can see because he made one great strategic mistake. You can't call it exactly a mistake, but whatever he planned boomeranged very badly. So we have only 43 in the favor of Kauravas, most of which were contributed by Drona himself, and 118 in the favor of Pandavas. In this Karna, he acceded 30 to Pandavas and 18 to Kauravas. And then there's Shalya Parva, the last day, where Kauravas won 4 confrontations and 13 were won by the Pandavas. So there is this whole tragic... hello? Yeah, I'm continuing. So there's this whole tragic episode of Chakravyuha on day 13, where Chakravyuha is one battle formation where the armies are arranged in the form of a wheel. And it's a dynamic vyuha where it's not like it's not as simple as the other vyuhas. So, and only Arjuna from the Pandava side knew how to tackle this Chakra vyuha, but he was basically he had his own battle, because Drona, the day he became the commander, he realized that Arjuna was the star warrior of the Pandava side. If we have to win this war, we have to keep Arjuna aside, basically distract him with something else. And, then the rest of us can overwhelm the rest of the Pandavas. So he formed this force called Samshaptakas. Samshaptakas, they took an oath. So to only fight Arjuna. Once they challenge Arjuna, either Arjuna has to kill them or they could kill Arjuna. And there won't be any running away, or there won't be any any participation in other battles. So this is a dedicated, mission Arjuna kind of strategy used by Drona. So he successfully separated Arjuna from the main battle. And with Chakravyuha, he was hoping to capture Yudhishthira. But Abhimanyu, the son of Arjuna, he knew the trick to penetrate Chakravyuha. What he did not know was on how to get out of it, right? So, but his uncle assured him, we'll be right behind you. So once you penetrate, we will, we'll take over and you don't have to. And if we read the original, that is Abhimanyu's speciality, basically. So he doesn't mostly fight from the front, but if anybody is in trouble, he and the sons of Draupadi or, even Ghatotkacha and all the younger warriors, right? They would just rush in, save that particular warrior and, and get out of that, difficult situation in the war. So that is Abhimanyu's speciality, to lead those rescue missions. They thought because he has that experience, that is his strength, he can create an opening for the Pandavas and they can penetrate the Chakravyuha. But that somehow boomeranged because Jayadratha, the brother-in-law of Duryodhana, he had a boon. He had a boon from Lord Shiva himself that for one day, he could defeat all the Pandavas except Arjun. Anybody. So once Abhimanyu entered the Chakravyuha, he blocked the other Pandavas from entering that formation. And Abhimanyu was caught within the formation. And even while fighting alone, the boy, he just shook up the whole of the Kaurava armies. We'll get to see his individual performance in the next slide. But basically, whole of the Kaurava host was engaging this one boy, Abhimanyu, till almost end of the day, where they decided, okay, this guy is not going to, let us live, so we should somehow kill him. So 6 of them combined and, they launched a cumulative attack, not once, but thrice. So one cumulative attack, he survived. Second one, he also survived. Third one, he was really, really tired and they attacked from behind. Karna was the guy who broke Abhimanyu's bow, and from there they successfully overwhelmed him, and lastly he was killed with by son of Dushasana with a gada. So that's that's a tragedy for Pandavas, right? To have a 16-year-old killed in such a ghastly manner. Arjuna is very, very angry. He comes to know that Jayadratha is the guy who blocked other Pandavas from entering and saving Abhimanyu. So he takes an oath that he would kill Jayadratha on day 14 before the sun sets. Basically, what has happened, the whole Drona's plan was to keep Arjuna away from the main battle, but it dragged back Arjuna to the main battle because he wanted to avenge his son. And the whole Kaurava host has fallen into defense, right? They were offending, actually. They were gaining, but they had to fall into defense now because they have to save Jayadratha. In saving Jayadratha, the whole army was concentrated in a complex triple vyuha. Within that one day, Arjuna basically crossed the whole of the Kaurava army and reached Jayadratha and killed him. Much with a lot of time to spare. A lot of video adaptations, they just show Krishna doing some magic or eclipse or something like that, but nothing like that happened according to the critical edition. He killed Jayadratha. Arjuna killed Jayadratha square and fair with a lot of time to spare. So basically, did I mention it in that graph is not included in the presentation, but we saw in the previous graph that total number of confrontations were 463 spread over 18 days. Day 14, that is Arjuna killing Jayadratha, that day had 125 battles. Why? Because basically, the mistake of Drona was to concentrate on Abhimanyu on day 13. The rest of the Pandava army had a good rest. I mean, I know they were agitated at losing Abhimanyu. They were angry, but they were fully rested that day. They could not fight their best. So the next day they were very determined to give their best. Which is why so many battles happened on day 14. There was a night battle also. So the most violent day and that's the day where actually I think, it's very safe to say Pandavas won the battle on day 14. though it continued till the last man died. But the Pandavas, basically the result of the war was decided on day 14. So this is the victory pie of Pandavas. Right, you have Bhima being the top contributor with 57 battles. Then comes Arjuna with 48 battles. The key thing is that Arjuna lost none of the battles. There were some battles with Bhishma where he was not, giving exactly his best, and it was a stalemate, not exactly a loss. Then there is Satyaki, who comes with 32 victories. Abhimanyu, just for 13 days, he was alive for 13 days, but he comes in with 25 victories. These three guys were fighting for all the 18 days. Yudhishthira, basically, he was on the rear as a king. You don't exactly lead the battle, right? So but he also had 12 battles. Nakula, Sahadeva have 11 between them. Drishtadyumna 6, and there are others, like Ghatotkacha, Drupada, then the sons of Draupadi, Shatanika, and all others. They, Airavan, all of them, they contributed to 25 of the Pandava victories. Coming to Kaurava victories, we have Drona contributing to more than 25% of the total victory pie. Then we have Karna and Ashwatthama, Shalya, Kripacharya, Bhishma, and others. You can see that none of the Kauravas themselves figure in the top list. So Duryodhana stands after Bhishma, basically, I guess, with 4 or 3 victories, and a lot of losses. So coming to each of the individual warrior snapshots, right? As I said, Bhima comes with 57 wins and 6 losses. A couple against Drona. Not exactly against Drona, one against Bhishma, one against Duryodhana, and a couple against Karna. Right, and there were no result battles. He had some 20 no result battles. Arjuna 48, 0, which is why we are going to make a case study of Arjuna for this. And there is Satyaki, then there's Abhimanyu, then there are others. Then here there is Drona, who has conceded, who secured 25 victories and conceded 9. Karna, surprising, right? He's lost more than he has won, for all the hype around the character. And there is Ashwatthama, right? His performance seems better than Karna's. And then there is Shalya, who did not fight as much as others. There are others, Bhagadatta, Bhishma, and Duryodhana, right, with so many losses. So basically, this exercise, it taught me that Duryodhana is very bad while fighting on the chariot. He's invincible, he's great with Gada, with the use of mace. But Kurukshetra was largely fought on the chariot. Right? The battle wholly belonged to people who could fight well on the chariot. Arjuna, Drona, Bhishma, even Bhima. Bhima fights very well on the chariot, as well as he's great with Gada. All-rounder, we call it, right? So, to our case study, till now I've shown you graphs which will look good on Excel sheet and presentations and stuff, but what the actionable points which we can carry away to our personal lives is from the lessons, right? The lessons behind Arjuna. So here I want it to be a bit interactive. Sorry, Harsh, how much time do we have?
I have time.
Oh, we have. Oh my God.
So there is time as long as you want to continue with the session. There will not be a problem.
Yeah, okay. Because I do tend to get carried away whenever I speak about Mahabharata, and I didn't notice the time passing so quickly. So quickly, what with your knowledge of Mahabharata, you tell me what would be the factors behind Arjuna's victory, that zero loss statistic. Like, that's a very fine statistic to have. Krishna, his focus. Yes, Krishna's what do you say? Not even a trump card. I mean, that's almost a factor, the constant factor behind Arjuna's victory, because as a obviously skill as well. Yes, he is skilled. His speed, very good, Amit. Yes. So Arjuna is one combination of these qualities, right? He is planning or strategy was basically done by Krishna. So yes. So the planning and he had a great strategician for a charioteer. So Krishna basically decided the who Arjuna will fight in what order. Because the first victory has to be quick, so he has to fight a lower ranked warrior. But as the war progresses, because once he secures a victory, it's a moral, the morale of the Pandavas would increase and the morale of Kauravas would decrease. Then he would take Arjuna to a greater ranked warrior like Drona or something. Then there is some rescue mission which Arjuna. So basically, it creates a brand around Arjuna, saying once Arjuna enters, now the battle is decided. Like once Rajnikant comes in the movies, then we know that the other guy cannot win, right? So that's the brand he created around Arjuna. The whole strategy. And yes, Arjuna had that matching skill, focus, talent, as well as years of hard work. Like we'll learn what is it about Arjuna which attracted a person like Krishna, which made a person like God like Krishna to stand by him in small and large parts of his life. Krishna was there making crucial decisions for Arjuna. Why? So Bhagavad Gita, right? All of us are aware of the Gita told by Bhagavan Shri Krishna to Arjuna. In that, there are some names that Krishna addresses Arjuna, which tell us about Arjuna's character, right? Anasuya is without jealousy, right? Arjuna practices, his whole life he has spent in bettering himself, improving himself. Whether he's the greatest or not, whether he's actually that strong or not, we can keep debating endlessly. But in his life, he had no time to bother about others. So he spent all his time focusing on his improvement, practicing his skills, improving himself. He gave up sleep. He used to practice at nights. Then after growing up, he supported his brothers. He organized one of the crucial Digvijayas during Rajasuya was by him. There were a lot of, he basically spent his whole life in, using his skill and teaching others. Basically, Krishna's cousins, we see Satyaki, then Krishna's son Pradyumna, they trained under Arjuna. Right? And Satyaki was so grateful for that reason that he came and participated in the war and won so many crucial battles. And Krishna himself became Arjuna's charioteer. Right? So giving back to the society, right? That is one thing which we need to learn from Arjuna. Anagha, sinless. This Bharata, that's a descendant of Bharata. So we that particular word I included because each of us at some level we are a descendant of Arjuna, and we have that upon us to carry his legacy. Whatever be our life's aim, it can be a financial aim, it can be a social aim, it can be a spiritual aim. So whatever it is, we have that whole legacy which we have to, strive to be worthy of. And there is Gudakesha, because he could control his sleep. He could conquer sleep, basically, which is a basic human need. But that was his, power of tapasya, that he could stay without sleep for days together. Basically that day 14, it had a night battle, and it had Arjuna playing a key role along with Ghatotkacha. This Parantapa, yes, he had, even without Krishna, there were a lot of battles that Arjuna won. So it's not like, Krishna just, made things happen out of nothing. So it's basically a raw talent honed into a skill given to the society that attracted the grace of God. So basically, there's a physical aspect of staying fit, giving up, not giving into laziness or sleep. So that is improving his own self. We all can do that, and then giving back to society, like being friendly with the Yadavas and others, and teaching whatever you have to other deserving people. And then there is this whole spiritual concept of being close to God. He had the wisdom, right? One of the other stories that I love from Mahabharata is when Arjuna and Duryodhana, both of them approach Krishna, saying, you are related to both of us. Duryodhana is Balarama's disciple, and Arjuna is cousin and brother-in-law. So you have to help both of us. Then Krishna says, okay, I have to help both of you. So I will give my army to one, and myself, I won't fight. I can at best offer advice or maybe drive a chariot. So it will be me without wielding any weapon, or my army. So he asks Arjuna to choose amongst these two options, and Arjuna just chooses Krishna, saying, there will be army or there won't be army, but no army is equal to you, Krishna. So that making choice of friends, right? Picking quality of quantity. That's one characteristic that we can learn from Arjuna. So that's the combination of all these three elements, the physical, social, and spiritual elements, that made Arjuna into that, all win, zero loss kind of an record of Arjuna. Basically has this as foundation, and I know there are a lot of detractors, or basically this table from the last slide, when I shared it on Facebook, it totally went viral, and it had a lot of these fans of Karna and Kauravas coming and questioning, what about that detail, what about this place where Arjuna fainted. But as Arjuna is a perfect human being having his faults as well, right? That's what makes him true inspiration for you and me. So all of us, we want a zero loss record like Arjuna. We don't want to be tragic heroes like Karna, right? If I give you an option of whose life would you want, everybody's going to choose Arjuna, right? We just don't want to lose everything, and for the, what do you say, having a talent and losing it for using it for a losing side or something like that. We probably feel for Karna. His life could have been better, but we don't want to be Karna, right? We want to be Arjuna. So what makes Arjuna is this. So my last question to you all. So what could have led to Karna's downfall? Everybody gives the reason as supporting Adharma, supporting Duryodhana was the reason for his downfall. But I want to hear from you what could be the reason, before going to the next slide, where there is one, I could identify just one characteristic of Karna which led to other, unfortunate mistakes of his, which just pulled him down. So any answers from the group? what led to Karna's downfall? Anything that comes to you? He gave away his shield, overconfidence, leaving his Divya Kavach. Yeah, one thing is his Kavacha was his defense. That didn't make him invincible. That did not give him any noted victories. But it could have saved him from dying. Or, it was an extra layer of protection. But that he traded for a Shakti. Shakti is basically a javelin with a power to not fail. So Vasava Shakti is Indra's Shakti. That he traded with Indra. You want my Kavach, I'll give you the Kavach, but in return you give me your Shakti. That will not fail, and with that I'll kill Arjuna. So Indra says, boss, if Krishna is with Arjuna, not even, you can't have my Shakti if you want, but if Krishna is with Arjuna, even my Vajra or, Shiva uses his Trishula, that's going to fail against Arjuna. So just be careful. But, as Indra predicted, Karna was forced to use that Shakti against Ghatotkacha. So his trump card failed, and ultimately he had to lose in the hands of Arjuna. So basically, yes, losing his Kavacha happens way late, just before the war. Somebody answered overconfidence. Yes, overconfidence, because he keeps bragging a lot while there is very less data to show that his bragging is true. There are other battles that he lost against Arjuna, even when not having Krishna by his side. So the one quality that pulled Karna down is Asuya, jealousy. Since their younger days, right? Again, another popular misconception about Karna is that he was not taught archery by Drona because he was a Sutaputra and all. That's a total trash story, because Sutas, they are not exactly lower caste. Sutas are children of where the parents are Brahmin as well as Kshatriya. So they come, strictly they come in between Brahmana and Kshatriya. So they are not of a lower caste, but because they have a Brahmana gene in them, they are more, it was a perception that they are more suited to works where it has strategic element as well as valor element. So charioteering, it needs both. You need to be strong, controlling 4 horses all day while, trusting the warrior and giving him advice. It's not a lowly job. It's a very, very crucial job, right? And it also, so as a Suta, as a charioteer, your functions, that is also there in Mahabharata. Basically, you have to ready the horses, see that the horses are well fed, they are energetic to go all day. Then you have to basically predict how the battle will turn, how many battles is this guy going to face. So many bows, so many arrows. Each arrow has a range. So what range, the close range arrows, middle range arrows, long range arrows. So how many arrows of which kind have to be placed? What all other this ones have other weapons like swords, javelins, and stuff. So what all other things have to be placed? So these are the key decisions that each charioteer has to take, and to make those decisions, a basic knowledge of Dhanur Vidya is necessary. So there is no way Karna would have been, not taught archery. So in fact, he learnt under Drona. What happened is Drona did not teach him Brahmastra, because basically in Drona's eye, he did not have the adhikara or the merit to learn Brahmastra. Drona did not teach Brahmastra to Duryodhana. Drona did not teach Brahmastra to Bhima. Both of them were Kshatriya princes. So caste was not the criteria. Basically, you need to have it's like, how, say, India having nuclear weapons and some other Middle Eastern country having nuclear weapons. No, so the way world looks at India as a responsible country with so it can control nuclear power, but some other country from the Middle East or our neighbors or something, they would be seen with suspicion, right? Say Pakistan having nuclear power is not seen with the same comfort as India having nuclear weapons. So there's something called responsibility of each warrior. So the guru is the judge of whether each warrior has that sense of responsibility or that restraint and judgment. So in Drona's eyes, Arjuna probably had that and Karna did not have it. So this Karna, he went to Parashurama and with a false identity and learnt Brahmastra. And after learning about Karna's actual truth, Parashurama says, this kind of vidya which you learn with falsehood, had you told the truth, you wanted to learn this, but this is the reason that you were rejected, maybe I would have taught. But straight away you came with a lie, and with anything built on falsehood will not come to your aid when you actually need it. That's not a curse. It's a truth, right? It's kind of a something that doesn't belong to us will never come to our use. We cannot use it at the time of our need. That is some truth which happens to everybody, all through their lives. So that is what Parashurama says. And actually, Karna manages to remember Brahmastra in his final battle, and he uses it twice. If I remember it right, he uses it twice. So all this curse and this one also, they don't hold that good for Karna. So what exactly pulled down Karna is jealousy. So his way of measuring himself only, the benchmark of measuring himself is through his opponent, which is a very sad way of doing it. Right. So always your own, this was one advice given to us by one of my professors, saying your biggest competition has to be you. So every day you focus on beating yourself, and over time you are going to improve by leaps and bounds, right? As long as we have someone else in our comparison zone, if that person slows down, we also slow down. If that person goes faster than us, then we lose confidence in ourselves, and then we blame it. We start blaming everybody around and doing that. So basically, the asuya, the jealousy, was the key characteristic which made Karna do all the the rest of his mistakes that pulled him down. That's my this one. So sorry, I missed a question. So anyways, we just have that marks the end of my presentation, and we can open for a few questions. Guys, those are my books, and that's my Amazon author profile. Please do check out my books. They are mostly focused on very strong female leads from our Puranic history, and these are my social media profiles, at the rate of Sai_Swarupa on Twitter, at the rate of author Sai Swarupa on Instagram, author Sai Swarupa on Facebook page, and I'm most active on my Twitter. So please feel free to interact with me there. So Harshji, shall we have around 5 to 10 minutes of Q&A?
Yes, ma'am. We can have around 10 minutes of Q&A.
10 minutes.
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Sure. So shall I stop the screen sharing? We can.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
That's okay if it remains like that also.
Okay.
So I think Amit has asked a question.
Yeah, I just flashed on my screen and it went off before I could read. So
Amit, would you like to read the question? Unmute yourself and read the question to Sai Swarupa ji.
Yes, let me see if I can.
Okay, my question is, as per Varna system, the skill of a person decides the varna of that particular person. So in that case, Karna was actually skilled in fighting. Like he was actually a Kshatriya by as per his skill. So why was he considered as a Shudra or not a Kshatriya?
See, from learning archery, Amit, is that? So Amit ji, he was taught archery, taught the basics of archery. It's the advanced archery that, Drona did not teach him. The same thing that Drona did not teach Duryodhana, Bhima, and others as well. So this Brahmastras that Drona taught were basically taught to Ashwathama, Arjuna, and some of them to Yudhishthira. So basically, to control a Divyastra, right? By invoking a Divyastra, you are manipulating nature. So that art has to be that the secret of behind such a Divyastra has to be given to a very responsible person. So here, I know, it sounds unfair, but rejecting a deserving candidate and teaching it to an undeserving candidate, right? The second one, if you teach it to the wrong person, a disaster can happen. If you don't teach it to the right person, probably he would have a certain disadvantage in life, but there won't be major catastrophe. So do you understand Drona's predicament here? Right. So again, anyways, Karna was free to pursue education elsewhere also. And it's not any kind of common education. Nobody was denied common education because of their varna. It's only the advanced stage where like manipulating nature and causing mass destruction kind of abilities, which were given after a lot of thought to only those people who have a lot of self-control. So it's not to do with varna. What is the time period of Mahabharata? Lalit, there's a lot of research done on the dating of Mahabharata. There are two ways of approaching dating of Mahabharata. One is by observing astronomical phenomena in Mahabharata itself. So you can backtrack and come up with all the years where this particular phenomena has taken place. And Mahabharata, it deals with a lot of, it deals with a whole generation. So in sequence, such phenomena, say eclipse, or so these planets being in conjunction, or this planet being in retrograde, that planet being in other positions, and also those can be extrapolated and predicted. I'll suggest you go through the works of Nilesh Neelkant Oak and Manish Pandit. Both have different theories around astronomical data of Mahabharata, but both have done rigorous research. So according to each of them, Mahabharata, according to Manish ji, Mahabharata has taken place in around 3300 BCE or something like that. And according to Nilesh Neelkant Oak, it's around 5000 BCE. And according to other researchers, right, they basically followed the genealogical is the Magadha, right? They have a record of who ruled Magadha right from Jarasandha to Chandragupta Maurya. So there is a not predicting exactly, speculating on each the period of each king, right? They have come up with anywhere from 700 BCE to 1400, 1500 BCE. A lot of scholars in this area, they believe that it is 1400 BCE, 1500 BCE is the date of the Mahabharata. Basically, they take into consideration this genealogical data along with metallurgy, those metals used, and the forgery techniques and the forging techniques and technological details. That way, they believe it is 1500 BCE. So we have a range right from 5000 BCE to 1400 BCE. Any other questions? Welcome. Huh. So great. Then I hope people did not go to sleep.
I don't think, ma'am, that people went to sleep. In fact, I'm sure this has been an eye opener for many of the participants who have actually attended. Because most of the time we do not get time to read through the actual scriptures. We have only seen right now this version, B.R. Chopra version, and earlier some other versions of Mahabharata. And we have always seen a lot of glamorization of the characters. So this is something that actually brings a lot of real data to the fore. So I'm sure everybody actually liked it. Lalit, you have a question? Kindly ask it fast,
Yes.
please.
When I see Mahabharata, where did it? The gold of Mahabharata, right? It's a good question, Lalit, because right, because the kings, they believed in a lot of dana, right? So it was never what do you say? We never believed in concentration of wealth in one hand. So there was a lot of dana given. Then the rishis or brahmins, whoever have got the dana, they used to use it in religious ceremonies like yajnas, or they used to run ashramas and use it for betterment of students and build institutions. So that way, there was a very healthy movement of wealth as such, in those times. And I'm also not sure if that the opulence that we see in these TV serials, that is the real. Whether that is the real picture or not, I am not the authority to say that. But as far as aesthetics go, I think I would like the portrayal by directors like Chandra Prakash Dwivedi. Their portrayals are more realistic than the very opulent portrayals by modern serial makers as such. So
I have one
thank
last
you.
question
Yeah,
from my side.
sure.
One point which has been bothering me a lot is like after watching this Mahabharata on TV, was Yudhishthir is considered Dharmaraja. Like Dharma is of utmost importance to him.
Yes.
So he being a Dharmaraj, why did he bet his entire kingdom, his brothers, and also went ahead and bet his wife? Like, isn't that against Dharma? And if he has done that, why did Bhishma, who kind of influences almost all of the decisions of Hastinapur, why did he not object? And why did somebody like Kripacharya or Dronacharya, who were
Nobody objected.
present that time, nobody objected to this? But this episode actually led to the war, right? Eventually.
Yes, exactly. So there is this favorite dialogue of mine from this animated movie called Kung Fu Panda, where there's this tortoise who's the grandmaster. He says something, which goes like, one often meets his destiny on the road he takes to avoid it. Right. So Yudhishthira was, if you read the Sabha Parva, right? Once challenge is put forth, there are around at least for 2 or 3 pages of that conversation. Yudhishthira tries counseling Duryodhana against the game of dice, where he actually predicts what can follow. The dice, it never brings good, and whatever you win in the game of dice, it never stays with you, and it might bring more of tragedies, and that can go to any extent. Families may be broken, wars might happen, it can affect the future generations. Basically, whatever happens in future, Yudhishthira predicts it and tries to counsel Duryodhana to take the challenge back. But according to the rules that Kshatriyas followed, right, the call for game of dice is like call for war. You cannot not play it. So that is, but the Yudhishthira knew what could follow, and maybe in retrospect we can say probably he should have simply refused and gone out, or things like that. But that's not the way it happened, and he paid the price for it.
Okay, thank you. That answers the question.
So thank you. It was wonderful presenting my research to you all. I hope you all enjoyed it. Please keep in touch and do check out my books. And Harshji, thank you. Thanks a lot for this opportunity.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for giving us time.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Stay home, stay safe, read books. This is the best time to revise history, read Mahabharata. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Namaste. Do we end?